All right, we're going to dive right in. Thank you, everybody, for showing up. This is another one of our free monthly wellness webinars. We're last month I got very deep in the weeds with the whole inflammation discussion to the point where it hurt my brain a little bit. So I figured today let's just take things back a little. Let's skew back to basics. Let's get back to some of the very basic things that we might want to know, need to know, get a refresher on, if you will, when it comes to our food and nutrition. So some of you might already know what I'm about to talk about, and that's totally fine. Some of you might use this as just a refresher course or some information that might inspire you and take away with it from what you will. So I'm going to keep my eye on the time because this can take us up till probably about the 45, 50-ish mark. And as always, I'll do my best to keep an eye on the chat and on the, if any Q&A pops up, but we can also have some time towards the end of our conversation for that as well. So let's go into some of our objectives for today, where, as I always like to do, I hope you're taking away from this when we're all said and done, some information, again, some knowledge around what the difference is between these keywords, these ideas, these topics that I'm going to be sharing with you today, how that might also affect what you choose and the sources of food that you look into to adding to your meal plans to help you create a little bit more of a well-balanced, diverse, and varied diet for yourself. Going in here, as always, you probably heard it when you were checking in and you opened up the webinar. We are recording this session as we record all of them. Just a quick side note, right? So you know you're on screen here because this is a Zoom call. So if you want to keep your cameras off, your microphone muted, please feel free to do that. I will eventually send out a recording of this when probably within the next couple of days or so, if I have my act together. Everyone who registers for these sessions will get a follow-up email with a recording link of this. So even if you can't come live, that's totally fine. I record them anyway, and I send them out as a link. Then a couple of months from now, because they're free, right? So I feel like I would like to share this with the rest of the world and make this more publicly available. I do upload these recordings to my YouTube channel. So just keep that in mind. If you don't want your face to be seen, or anything that you want to remain private, just make sure that you acknowledge that. But otherwise, it's going to be in a public facing channel on my YouTube channel. So yeah, I also like to disclaim, right, that I'm a dietitian, not your dietitian. So please make sure that you are taking in all of this information just as basic general knowledge. Be sure to follow up with your own healthcare providers, your doctors, your dietitians, if you are currently looking to mix up a little bit, change up a little bit your own lifestyle habits, especially if you are taking any medicines that might need, you might need to pay attention to. So please make sure you don't do anything unnecessary until you speak to a professional. So here, if you've never met me before, if you've never met me before, this is who I am. I'm Dina D'Alessandro. I have a Master of Science in Nutrition, and I am a registered dietitian nutritionist. Sometimes we use that word interchangeably. I'm a second career, so I went back to school about 11 years ago now, and about 8 years ago, I officially became a dietitian. I'm also the adjunct lecturer and the campus nutritionist over at Lehman College. I know a lot of you who are joining me here today who sign up are also from Lehman College, so thank you. And I'm hoping I'm representing and doing our alma mater well. I also am on the social media internet platforms everywhere as Dish with Dina. And then I do have a background and experience in quite a lot of things. I have no one specific thing that I work with or for. I try to have kind of a generalist type of view, but I have been trained in some of the preventions for diabetes. I've worked with a lot of high risk prenatal populations. So pregnant people who are either dealing with fertility issues, or they have had some sort of complications in getting pregnant, or they've been diagnosed with gestational diabetes. But really, it spans the gamut. I am so pleased and proud and honored to be a part of everybody's health and wellness journeys when they come to see me. I also have been now kind of, it's a cool thing, as you know better and do better and get a little bit more under your belt career-wise, people start asking you to do stuff. So I'm very happy and honored that I get a lot of opportunities in doing things like speaking engagements and working on research assignments, etc. Oh, thank you for joining. Thank you so much. I appreciate everybody coming. Thank you for your comments in the chat. So we're going to jump into kind of an overview of a few things. A lot of times these these words get interchanged, and I think it's nice just to clarify and also give some guidance for people who are a little bit concerned, confused, curious about how to create well-balanced diets for themselves. And when I use the word diet, I'm really using just like an eating plan or a meal plan. I'm not talking about a specific, you're on a diet for something, but I do want to acknowledge that not everybody eats the same exact way, depending on your culture, your food preferences, any of your allergies or conditions that you might have. So let's start with the general term of macronutrients. Here we're talking about macro, meaning large. These are large sized molecules that in the form of food provide us with what is known as energy, right? This is calories. Calories provide us with energy. They have a variety of different things too. We'll talk about those in a second, but our calorie is how we measure in our body the energy that's transferred from what the food source is to what our body condition, our body function is. So when you hear the term I'm burning calories, or I'm working out and I'm burning calories, yes, if that is you're actively involved in that, but involuntarily a lot of things are going on behind the scenes in your body that your body requires energy too. So I tend to think of this as the quantity, right? The quantity of your food. And much, I'll keep using this almost like an analogy through the course of today's webinar, much like a car, for those of you who drive or know how to drive, much like a car, being having put gas into its engine, same thing is similar to our bodies. Our bodies require fuel. So fuel comes in the form of macronutrients. Macronutrients are broken down into three categories. We have here in front of us carbohydrates, protein, and fats, also known as lipids. We're going to go a little bit more into detail into that coming up soon. And let's start from here. I will just start by saying all foods have some sort of combination of all three things in some way. Usually they usually have a combination or a ratio of all three things. But when we talk about carbohydrates, some of the foods that tend to be higher in carbohydrates are things like our more starchy types of vegetables, our white versions of grains, or our whole grains as well. So some of the things listed here like bread, pasta, rice, and potato come up as kind of like what you think of first when you think of carbohydrates. But like I said, everything has, almost everything has carbs. I also want to point out here too that this is usually, unfortunately, the first thing that gets sacrificed when people start shifting up their diet. There's a lot of negative discussions out there, or your doctor might scare you into thinking you can no longer eat carbohydrates. And I will tell you right now that is completely inappropriate and incorrect, because our body really does require carbohydrates in a lot of its functions. It just depends on how much of everything else you're getting, what might be missing from your diet, what you might be deficient in. So I just want to honor and acknowledge that you don't have to get rid of your carbs. In fact, I say this all the time. As an Italian person, I'm contractually obligated to have a bowl of pasta at least once a week, and you will try out of my cold, dead hands any kind of carbohydrates. So I'll say that. If you are super active, carbohydrates are a great form of energy. It's actually what our body uses first to create energy for us. So according to the rules, the recommendations that we have in our guidelines of America, we tend to say recommended about 45 to 65% of our total overall calories come from carbs for exactly that, because we utilize them as a first form of energy. I'm going to also share with you, I'm sure a lot of you already know this, but when it comes to science and food and nutrition, we do use the metric forms of units of measurement. So we weigh and measure our carbs, our food, in grams. So as far as carbohydrates go, they carry 4 calories per gram of carbohydrates. So I'm going to give an example here. Forgive me because I wrote down some notes when I was talking earlier. If I have an example like this, a slice of bread, just say one serving, one slice of bread as an example. Bread will have, again, the majority of its macros are coming from carbs. So bread has about 12 grams of carbs, about 4 grams of protein, maybe even a little bit more of that if it has a whole grain version of it, and about 1 gram of fat. Again, maybe a little bit more if it's a whole grain. So if you add all those up, that comes out to about 80-ish calories for a slice of bread, with the majority of the macros coming from carbs. So now we switch to the next macronutrient, which is protein. A lot of people think of protein in the sources only about animal products, but really there's a lot of stuff that carries protein in it too. But usually the things that have a higher ratio of protein in them are definitely the animal versions of things like you see here: meat, fish, and eggs, chicken, Milk also is a good source of protein, but plant-based proteins too, like beans and legumes and soy-based products like tofu, also kind of high in the ratio of protein. So here, as an example here, protein is used to help us with repairing our cells and creating new cells. Also, as we age, we have what is known as sarcopenia, which is age-related muscle mass deterioration. So we kind of waste away a little bit as our decades progress, and we want to make sure that we're basing a lot of our meals around protein to help us maintain that muscle mass. If you're also working out a lot, you're doing a lot of bodybuilding or strength training or resistance training by nature, and doing those forms of physical activity, we do tend to have little tiny tears in our muscle. So by taking in protein immediately afterwards, you can also repair those little tears and so on. It also helps with if you are in a more critically clinical situation, like you're recovering from a burn or a surgery, or you're undergoing chemotherapy, or you're managing a life with HIV or AIDS, these are things that can also waste away our cells and can do damage to our skin and our muscles. So having a more protein dense meal or diet will help with repairing those damaged tissues. So like carbohydrates, protein carries 4 calories per gram. And depending on who you are and what you do, usually we don't need a ton of it in our diet. So this is a little bit less of a range, about 10 to 35% of our total daily calories should come from protein. So here again, as an example, we have an egg. An egg is a great source of protein. It carries about 6 grams of protein for one egg. That's a usually just right in the egg white, about 4 grams of fat that usually comes right out of the egg yolk, and barely anything. I don't even think it has 1 gram of carbohydrates because that's not how eggs are rolling, no pun intended. So if you add all that stuff up together, the macros, right, because we have calories attached to that, that comes out to about 70-ish, 72 calories per egg. All right, next up we have fats, also known as lipids. Some examples of high fat foods, as you can see here, things like oil and butter and cheese, but also sometimes we associate fats as a not healthy or an unhealthy type of version of a macronutrient, but we also have healthy versions of things like olive oil, or we have nuts and avocados that are high in healthy fats. So again, these are just examples of high fat foods. Body needs a little bit of everything because fats help transport a lot of things throughout our body. It helps also with insulating us and providing us with temperature control. It's a form of energy in the way that if we are not getting enough carbohydrates, the next thing our body will utilize to help us move and function it'll take the fat stores. The body usually doesn't go to our protein sources unless it's absolutely necessary, and if ever that is the case, that's a problem. We don't want our body to take away and eat away at our protein. Protein is kind of like the last thing because then it can cause a lot more severe issues going forward. So here you can see, not fat shaming fat, right? But it does happen to have more than twice as many calories as carbs and protein. So it clocks in at 9 calories per gram. And again, because it's very essential in a lot of the things and activities and functions that we have in our daily life, we usually recommend about 20 to 35% of our overall calories come from fat rich sources or fat containing foods. So here, the example here is olive oil. So a tablespoon of olive oil is basically 100% fat. So it's about 13 grams of fat. No protein, no carbs in this particular example. So if you add that up, it comes out to about 120 calories per tablespoon. So I share calories with you because sometimes I find a lot of people don't eat enough throughout the day. And like I said, our macronutrients kind of, to me, are the quantity of what we need, right? The gas in the car, I need to fill up the tank. Am I giving myself enough gas to get from point A to point B? Or do I need to stop along the way at a different gas station because I forgot to fill up before? So just as a quick side note, I'm sharing with you, maybe some of you have already come across this nonsense, right? So these days we have online calculators. If you feel like you want to acknowledge or calculate for yourself what your daily calories should be, there's a lot of information to take into account here. You can definitely do this on an online calculator, but if you feel like doing the long form way here, it relies on our biological sex, it relies on our age, it relies on our height, our current weight, and also what is known as our physical activity level. So all of these calculations that you see in front of you provide us with what is known as our estimated energy requirements, what our individual body needs over the course of a day to just stay alive, keep active, and help us with replenishing any of what we might be doing in physical activity. So on the bottom, to make it a little bit easier on all of you, it comes out to about 25 to 35 calories per kilogram of body weight. If you don't know what you are in kilos, you want to do it instead in pounds, that comes out to about 13 to 15 calories per pound of body weight, if that's something you feel like calculating. I just want to side note this as well. I definitely don't encourage people to track calories or become obsessive over those things because there's a lot of issues around triggering, disordered eating patterns, or people end up, really being very super disciplined and restrictive in certain ways. But in the clinical world where we're trying to keep people alive, this is very important information for us to have. So we want to make sure we're helping people with being able to breathe and move their body in a certain way. So this is why I like sharing that. So let's take a look. So calories per weight. So if you can see on the bottom there, if you weigh, let's do an example, right? So if I weigh, I'm going to take out my little calculator here. Let's take an example of what I said, 13 to 15 calories per pound, right? So if I weigh 140 pounds and I'm not super active today, I'm just going to make it 13 calories per pound. I'm going to clock in at, can you see that? About 1,820 calories a day. Now, that's an individual thing, right? That might seem, for me, that might actually seem a little high. If I try to force feed myself 1,800 calories, I might not feel super comfortable with that. So on average, I might be a little bit lower, but maybe on days where I'm really active, I'm moving around a lot, I might need to maintain that to make sure that I am keeping myself in functioning form and I'm not falling asleep during things. And so that breaks up over the course of the day, meal to meal, that at the end of the day, I'm getting about 1,800 calories per day. Does that make sense? I hope that that answered the question that you threw in there. If not, we can definitely talk about that more when we have the Q&A at the end of our session. Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. Okay, so let's move into the discussion around micronutrients. So if macronutrients are large size molecules, they come with calories, depending on fat or carbs or protein. I call them the quantity of our meals. This is the quality of our meal. Our micronutrients are much smaller molecules, micro. Our body does not need as much of this as the other forms. So you saw in the macronutrients, we measure them in grams. In micronutrients, we measure them as micro or milligrams. So a smaller quantity. Macros had carbs and fats and proteins. Micronutrients have vitamins and minerals. That's how we separate out those categories. This is no calories associated with micronutrients, and there could be issues with excessive or inadequate amounts of micronutrients. If we have a deficiency in something, like if you think of iron deficient anemia or a deficiency in vitamin D, right, that can cause some complications in our overall body or organ systems, or it might put us more at risk for a condition down the line. So these are the chemical substances that are found within our foods. So unlike macronutrients, like I said, almost all of the foods have a little bit of everything or some sort of combination of carbs and fats and proteins. But unlike that, most foods do not have a little bit of everything. They only have a certain amount of a couple of different vitamins and minerals. So again, I'll walk through a couple of examples coming up, but the reason why I bring this up is why, if you can, it's really important to diversify and vary your diet. The more you kind of mix and combine certain foods, the better your odds are that you're going to meet all of those nutritional needs because you're going to have such a wide variety of things going on. So it's not like just one thing, just one color, that's it. You're going to have bits and pieces coming in to make a whole puzzle form for you. So the good news here is that micronutrients, vitamins and minerals can be found in a little bit of everything, like we said, right? You can mix and match your different types of food. So if you don't love certain things, like if you don't like fruit, you can go to a vegetable. If you don't eat meat, you can do something else, right? All of these things will bring in some sort of combination of vitamins and minerals. So on the right-hand side, I have some examples there, right? So we have broccoli. Broccoli is a great source of plant-based iron. It also has some calcium in it, and it also has vitamin K. Top right, we have beans. Beans do have a good amount of B vitamins. It also has some phosphorus in it, and I'm sure there's other vitamins and minerals in it too that I can't remember right now. Bottom right, we have sliced steak. So that's an animal product, very rich form of iron, as well as some other vitamins and minerals. And then that orange fruit, which I'm thinking is an orange, that has vitamin C, and it also has some other nutrients in it too. But usually vitamin C is the thing we think of when we think of things like citrus fruits. But you can see there, right? The whole point of this is that depending on how open you are, what kind of flavors you enjoy, whatever foods you shop for, whatever might be in your budget too, you could get a wide variety of things to kind of mix and match. So hopefully in the coming slides, we'll give you some inspiration on how to do just that. So here, just again, to define a couple of things for you, vitamins come in two forms. We have fat soluble and water soluble. And what that means is that fat soluble vitamins are going to be transported throughout the body using fat as a source, and water soluble we use water. We also I'm probably going to do a future webinar going a little bit more into detail with vitamins and minerals and supplements and stuff at one point. So for today I'm just going to stay a little higher level. But the vitamins A, D, E, and K that are fat soluble, some of them can be toxic at high levels. So not necessarily coming from food, but if you're over supplementing, if you're on mega doses of things, there could be some problems with liver issues or other kind of like toxic side effects that happen. So I usually try to say, start with the food first. If you need to supplement with something, make sure you're checking with your doctor before you think you need to take some sort of mega dose of something, or at least just go by whatever the dose is on the bottle that you're purchasing if you feel like you need to add more to your overall intake. Water solubles, however, I mean, there are some exceptions, but water soluble vitamins, if you end up having some excessive amounts in your body through supplementation, you can usually excrete that. You can pee it out. So those usually tend not to be super toxic, with some exceptions. But again, we're defaulting to, in this discussion, around vitamins and minerals that are found in food form. On the section here with the minerals, so there are about, I think, 103 minerals on the periodic table right now. A lot of things that get discovered get added to it. But this, what you see in front of you, are what are known as the more essential type of mineral. So what our body requires, sometimes our body can make things on its own. It has the ability to do that. And some things it needs to be provided to us in food form. So you're gonna have to bear with me as I read through my notes here because I can't remember what everything, what all of these things are. But I want to share with you, as you're looking at that list, like to me, things that I feel are somewhat more well known are like calcium, sodium, iron, maybe iodine. I don't know, pick and choose some of the things that you think you have seen before, and maybe some things that you're not entirely sure of where they come from. And I'm going to give you some examples of where you can find these types of what kind of foods can contain some of these different types of minerals. So for example, something like chloride. Chloride can come from seaweed, tomatoes, olives, meat, milk, eggs. It's also part of sodium chloride, which is the chemical name for table salt. So if you're adding salt to your diet or salt to a recipe, you have chloride in there. Magnesium we can find in things like dark chocolate, avocado, nuts, legumes. Legumes are things like beans and peas and lentils. You can also find them in whole grains and spinach. If we jump down to chromium, chromium can be found in something called brewer's yeast, which is like a ground up sprinkly thing that you can add to your salads, your cereals. It can also be found in beef, turkey, and broccoli. Copper can be found in organ meats. So if you eat something like liver, that's a good source of copper. Nuts and seeds, whole grains, and shellfish also carry copper in it too. Molybdenum. When was the last time you even gave 2 seconds of thought about molybdenum? Probably never. Molybdenum can be found in things like so many things, by the way: legumes, black-eyed peas, lima beans, whole grains, rice, nuts, potatoes, bananas, leafy greens, leafy vegetables, dairy products, milk, yogurt, cheese, beef, chicken, and eggs. Molybdenum's really pulling up there. It's really doing a lot of work. Manganese can be found in things like whole grains, clams, oysters, mussels, nuts, soybeans, and even things like herbs and spices like black pepper. So if you remember from our inflammation webinar, if you attended that, we talked about something called capsaicin, which was one of those chemical substances that help with fighting inflammation that can be found in black pepper. So, right, the reason why I'm sharing some of these examples with you is because whether you eat animals, plants, maybe you're allergic to certain things, you don't love certain flavors. If you create a combination of foods that you enjoy, you can really be able to address the needs or meet the needs that are required or recommended for your daily intake of these types of minerals. Oh, I wanted to add selenium. Selenium, if you take 2 Brazil nuts a day, you've met your entire daily need of selenium. So that's the easiest thing you can do. You can also find it in seeds, cottage cheese, and chicken. The list goes on, my friend. All right, hang on one sec. I do see a chat, so I'm going to stop and see if I can. Yeah, there you go. First time you're hearing of some of these things. I know. It's not like they're the popular ones, but they pull their weight and they do a lot of really important things in our body, like help us with cellular structures, collagen, like skin formation, repairing of cells, supporting our liver health. So everything does a little bit. Oh, fluoride. I wanted to talk about fluoride too, because fluoride, the first thing that we think sometimes is toothpaste or it's in the water system, right? We add fluoride into our water system, but you can also find fluoride in things like canned shellfish, like blue crab. Oatmeals, raisins, and potatoes can also have fluoride in them too. Again, this is just naturally occurring minerals that, depending on where they grow or how they are farmed, these are the things that are coming naturally in them. Okay, let's move on. I want to just give a quick shout out to honorable mentions. Fiber. First thing is fiber. Fiber is technically part of our carbohydrate family, but it doesn't digest properly. So depending on the kind of fiber that we are taking in, it either has 0 calories per gram or maybe 2 calories per gram. And you'll see these in all of your plant-based foods in a variety of different ratios or amounts. Usually your whole grains, beans, lentils, things like that are going to have a little bit more higher fiber content. And things like your leafy greens might have a little bit less fiber content. But again, if you mix and match, add some things to your diet, ideally, you want to hit about 25 to 35 grams of fiber a day. And you can get that if you're focusing on some of these plant-based foods. Fiber is fantastic at helping with regulating our gastrointestinal system and reducing the risk of a lot of chronic conditions, and also helping prevent cancer and things from forming in our body as well. So it slows down the roll when we're eating. It also acts, depending on the type of fiber, it acts either as I like to say, like a wet sponge or a Brillo pad, a scrubby sponge or a scrubby Brillo pad, with it getting rid of cholesterol or anything that's kind of blocking our arteries. And the rule here, if you're going to be starting to increase your fiber intake, is please make sure that you also increase your water intake. Otherwise, you are going to be suffering from some serious constipation, friends, and we don't want that happening. All right, so here I want to also give a shout out to water. Water is not part of the macro or micro family. There are no calories in water if you just have plain water, but I thought it might be interesting to share with you some other ways that you can get water in your diet. So water you can take from its, liquid form, obviously in tap water or bottled water or however from the fountain, etc. But a lot of these water dense foods could also be part of your daily water intake. So about 25% of your total water intake over the course of a day is usually from certain things like this. So if you have a lot of water dense foods like cucumbers, watermelon, these types of fruits and vegetables that if you cut into them, you can kind of see the water cracking open. Or if you're adding water to a recipe like a soup or a stew or even a tea or a coffee, that still counts towards your water consumption. So if you don't love tap water, if you don't love plain water, you can get it in other forms, because we really want to make sure we're supporting your whole overall body system. By nature, our body is doing a bazillion different kinds of chemical reactions, and water can help with those reactions. We also excrete water too, so it plays a role in transforming some of the energy that we are taking in into creating, or the foods we're taking into energy. It also helps with the excretion of waste, so it comes out in the form of urine usually, and it can also help with temperature regulation too. So when we sweat, this is a form of what water is doing, one of the roles that water plays in there. So again, just giving a quick shout out to honorable mentions. Give me one second. I'm just going to check the chat again. Yeah, so if you have issues, the question is, how about people who have digestive systems like problems by eating fiber? So again, when the information I'm sharing today is kind of just a general overall, but everybody individually has to make sure that they're taking care of themselves. So if people are having issues with fiber intake, my question would usually be how much of too much is anything? So if you are taking in forms of fiber in the food form, I would always encourage making sure you're also keeping hydrated or adding fluid to it because that can exacerbate it. If you have to deny yourself of fiber because of some irritable issues or you have I forget some of the conditions. I want to say Crohn's disease, but I don't know if that's exactly fiber free. But if you're dealing with certain things where you have to stay fiber free or very limited amounts of fiber, then you might be able to supplement it so it won't be as intense on your system. This would be, again, something that you would discuss with your healthcare provider or your dietitian to see exactly what your condition is and where you might be able to offset something like that. So you can maybe opt for a smaller amount of fiber in some of those lower level foods. Maybe you have to stay away from having something like beans, or maybe you can have beans, but it has to be a very small portion, like a quarter cup, not a whole bunch of it like some other people might be able to manage it. Depends on your threshold. Yeah, so thank you for your question. All right, so we're gonna now we have macros, the quantity of your food, micros, the quality of your food, and now we've entered into the chat here something called food groups. Back in the day, this used to be the food pyramid. Now we kind of converted it into something that looks a little bit more visually interesting, like a plate. Take a look at this. Like, what do you see around it, right? We just got done talking about fats and carbs and protein. Well, how come fats and carbs aren't listed here, but protein is? Like, that's curious to me when I first saw this. I also don't think everybody eats exactly like this, but I kind of get the understanding of the ratio of where things should be. I disagree with some of these things here too. Maybe you also have some comments about that. So if you do have any thoughts or comments, you can throw them in the chat as I go through this slide and the next slide, and then I'll come back and see if anybody's typed anything in. What I will share with you is the way that I approach this is I kind of cover the top section for a sec when I'm working with my patients. And I look at the bottom and I say to them, if we focus first on vegetables and protein, then I feel like we've covered a lot of ground there. A lot of good quality nutrients can come from that. We have a wide variety of what protein and vegetables can look like too. And everybody can benefit from vegetables and protein. The top part of that might be a little bit different. Not everybody loves to eat fruit, or sometimes people eat more fruit than vegetables, and I would probably encourage the opposite. Sometimes people are very grain based, like they have a lot of grains in their diet, but they don't necessarily have the other things. So again, I would kind of look at it as like a secondary option in some ways, making sure that's we add that in after we've already established a base around vegetables and protein. Not for every single meal, obviously. Not everything has to be super 100% on the nose with these things. And on the right-hand side, we have dairy. So, by nature, after the age of about 2 or 3, our bodies tend to lose the enzyme that helps us break down the sugar molecule that's in dairy. So if you've heard of somebody who's lactose intolerant, that's what that means. We can no longer consume certain dairy products. They hurt our belly or we have issues digesting them. That's one of the top allergens too. So some people are allergic to milk or dairy products, animal dairy products. So that's something too that, people might not want to eat or drink. And also the way it looks here, it's almost like with every meal, you must have a cup of milk. And I don't necessarily agree with that. I'd rather you have a glass of water and maybe dairy can fold into something else. So, as I usually tend to do with my patients and when I teach my students too, I tend to encourage them words, instead of words, use pictures. Use pictures. So this to me is a little bit of a better representation. I think people can visually see and associate what foods that they are drawn to, what things that they enjoy eating. And again, even though it's created as a design on a plate and not everybody's going to eat exactly like this every time, like if you have a soup or a smoothie, this might not look exactly like that, but you can kind of see what we're talking about here with the visual representation. And then this is the Canadian version, by the way, of the plate diagram. So on the bottom right, they actually folded in dairy into the protein section. That's probably what I would do too. So I would keep all those protein items there. You can see things that are recognizable like meat. You can even see some tofu. There's some beans listed there too. I think there's nuts in there. Also, nuts are actually a good source of fat and have some protein in it too. There's an egg, salmon. Top right, we have some of the grain-based foods, pasta, etc. And then on the left-hand side, I might have split that up. I might, like I said before, with making sure people are getting their primary source through veggies first and then secondary sources through fruit. That's just because the patient populations that I work with, that benefits them. That's usually my recommendations. So let me hop in the chat and just take a look if anybody has any comments on what they're seeing here, or any things that you think look better or different when you look at the American version versus the Canadian version of our food groups sources. I also think, like I said, this can be a little bit confusing because it's like, okay, so then where are the macronutrients? Micronutrients are all represented here because of the different color, shapes, sizes, and textures. They all come with different vitamins and minerals. But like I said before, if you have a well combined plate or diverse amount of food that you're eating over the course of the week, you really could be hitting all things that you need. You can be getting a good variety of your macros and your micros in there. All right, so let's move on to, with maybe about 10 minutes or so, let's take a look at some of the examples that I'm going to share with you. And feel free to put in the chat if you see anything missing, if you think this is a good example of a meal that covers the variety of macronutrients, carbs and fats and proteins. And also, do you think it covers a variety of some of the potential vitamins and minerals that somebody might need? So I'll get us started with this one. This one is, it looks to me like 100% vegan vegetarian dish here. On the very left-hand side in that little bowl to the corner, there's almonds there. So almonds are nuts, good source of healthy fats, actually a good source of calcium too, plant-based calcium. In this main bowl up towards the front here, we have cubed tofu. So we said tofu was a good source of plant-based protein as well. A good source of fiber too, believe it or not. Let's go, I guess, is that clockwise? Let's go bottom left. We have some quinoa. So again, that's a sort of a grain seed-based food that people will use in place of maybe couscous or rice. That's very dense in protein as well. And there's a lot of B vitamins in there too. We also have some herb. I can't remember what that herb is there sitting in the front, but that's an herb that's added there too. So that also brings to the table some micronutrients as well. Back on the left-hand side, we have broccoli. So again, great source of vitamin K, good source of plant-based calcium too, good fiber amount in there also. As we go towards the very back, it looks like there might be some bib lettuce or leafy green lettuce in the back. There, light leafy green lettuce in the back there. So again, that's water dense food there, bringing us some vitamins and minerals, mostly carbs here too, carbs and fiber. In that middle section, that looks like a little pile of chickpeas or garbanzo beans. So again, that's plant-based proteins. It's starchy, it's kind of a starchy fibrous food. So there's fiber and it's mostly carbohydrates in there too, but it does have a good source of protein as well. Then on the right, I want to say maybe that looks like beets, those like very dark red items in the back. So again, great anything deeply colored is going to bring with it its own version of vitamins and minerals. We have some sliced avocado there, so great source of healthy fat, good source of fiber. And then I even see a sprinkling of nuts on top of that too. And then towards the front here, we have sliced up, I think that's either sweet potato or yam. So that vibrant orange is almost always associated with vitamin A, which helps with eyesight. And again, good source of fiber because it has the skin on it. So anytime you leave the skin on something, it's always going to bring a little bit of extra fiber to the table, literally and figuratively. And that's mostly carbohydrates, but there's some protein in that too. And then assuming that maybe there's a drizzle of dressing or olive oil, that would also be that would acknowledge the fat content of it. So for me, a thumbs up on this. Like this really covers a lot of the macro and micronutrients that I think looks complete. Now here's a little bit more of a simplified version. This is just hummus. Hummus is just ground up chickpeas, garbanzo beans, usually with some garlic and some olive oil, but it still meets the requirements of a well-rounded, well-balanced meal. And you also have some pita bread on the side, and you also have slices of lemon. Lemon by nature help extract some of the iron, like I was saying before, right? Extract some of the iron from our food sources, our plant-based food sources. So that helps with adding that in. It also helps with giving some flavor, and it also has vitamin C in it. So we have the carbohydrates, the grain-based food in the pita, we have the plant-based protein in the chickpeas, and with the drizzle of olive oil, that is a healthy fat. So again, macronutrients and some micronutrients represented there. This is actually something that I made. This is a recipe, a French toast recipe. So we have 3 pieces of whole grain bread. This is dipped in an egg batter, whole eggs. We have crushed up, chopped up walnuts. We have some sliced up strawberries, and we do have a drizzle of maple syrup too. So again, the carbohydrates are coming from our bread source. And because it's whole wheat, there's a whole grain version of that too. So that's bringing some fiber to it as well, along with some B vitamins too, and some folic acid as well. We also have the egg wash. So the egg batter that was used in there, that's protein and fat. The strawberries contain a deeply colored, nutrient-dense amount of vitamins and minerals there too. It also is carbohydrates mostly. And then we have the nuts that bring that healthy fat and some plant-based proteins as well. So again, right, even though this is something that seems kind of silly, it doesn't have any green vegetables on it, but it still meets some of the recommendations that we usually want people to have. So the more variety and diversity and things that you kind of mix and match and combine over the course of your meals, or if you look at it and go, I think something's missing from this, what would I add? As an example, not necessarily, well, yeah, actually from here, let's take a look at these, right? So these are tacos. I think on the 2 left are grilled fish, and the 3 on the right are carnitas, which is like a pulled pork. So the carbs are coming from your tortilla. And if it's corn-based tortilla, that's a whole grain, so you're having some fiber in that as well. The fish and the pork bring the animal-based protein. And maybe I might throw in like a slice of avocado if this wasn't created with olive oil or oil of some sort to bring in a healthy fat. So again, macronutrients covered, micronutrients from all the things that these things already come with, and you even see the sprinkling of whatever that is, either parsley or cilantro on top of that too. So we're bringing in those herbs and those spices in to add some more depth to the flavor, but also to bring in some of the micronutrients too. Okay, here's another example of a salad that I made. So we have leafy greens on the bottom, we have sliced peaches on the top. So again, I added peaches. It's a fruit, but it also has vitamin C in it. So it's going to help extract the iron from my leafy greens since I don't have any animal-based sources in this thing. My protein is coming from my white cannellini beans in there. And I also have some olives in there too. And the dressing includes some olive oil. So that brings me that adds the healthy fats to my diet too. And then again, because the color, the variety of different fruits and vegetables and things that are added in here. I don't think I put any nuts or seeds on there, but that might be something that I might want to add. A little sprinkle of seeds or something. So I think you're getting the hang of this now, right? You're looking at a variety of different things, whether they're at one plate or a whole bowl of something. You can mix and match. You can combine different versions of stuff. Even something as simple as a can of soup that you dump into a bowl with a piece of bread and a slice and a pat of butter on the side. This is technically meeting all the criteria for your macronutrients. Depending on what's in that bowl, if I eat meat, I might add some, maybe it's chicken broth in there, or maybe I'll pull some shredded chicken in it to add up a little bit more of the protein factor. But again, not everything has to be exactly 100% perfect, but there's a good variety of different colors and flavors and food items in this thing. So again, get some inspiration, take a look at some of these foods, see if anything's maybe missing or something that you haven't thought of about in a while of what you might want to add to your diet or add to your meal plan. Especially, we want to also acknowledge cultural, traditional foods and recipes too. So a lot of these things are kind of American based. You saw Mexican tacos there as well. This, I think, is a curry of some sort. We have like the yogurt on top of it. So that might be Middle Eastern or Lebanese. So again, just honoring different flavors and context, not taking anything away. We have the white rice here, which is totally fine. It doesn't have to be brown rice. It doesn't have to be no rice. So you're honoring the carbohydrates, you're honoring the protein sources, you're honoring some of the fat sources here too. This is a stir fry. Again, vibrantly colored vegetables in some sort of oil, maybe sesame oil or olive oil in there. There is protein in this, but if we wanted to bump up the protein a little bit more, we could add some diced tofu, or depending on what your flavor preferences or your dietary preferences are, maybe some shredded chicken or some sliced beef would be great in this as well. So throw into the chat what kind of ideas are you coming up with? Do you feel like you have any areas in which you might want to jazz up your own meals? Are there things that are missing from your diet? At the end of these webinars, I always like to ask you, you can commit in person, you can commit publicly or privately. What things do you want to like start doing? What do you think you want to add to your meals? What things do you want to take into account, whether it's dietary or lifestyle habits in general? What are you already doing? What are some things that you're like, I got this down, I'm going to continue doing it, it's totally working for me? And then what are some things that you might want to stop doing? Things that maybe don't serve you any longer, or if it's something based on either budget constraints or time constraints, maybe you can try to figure out a resource that could help you with that so that you don't have to constantly be responsible for something. Maybe somebody else can help you with that. So think about some of the things that can maybe just bump up that level a little bit to add a little bit more healthification to your meals, or variety to whatever it is that you might be planning for yourself. And as you think about that stuff, let me take a look at who's here. Hi, everybody who's joining. Hello, hello. Thanks so much. For those of you who may have joined a couple of minutes after I started talking, as you know, this is being recorded, obviously, but I always say that at the end of our usually within a couple of days, depending on if I can get my act together quick enough, I'll send out the link to the recording so you have this in case you did come late, or in case you register for this and we're not able to attend in person. Totally fine. And then usually I let a couple of months go by and I upload the recording to my YouTube channel. So if, in the public facing world, if people didn't even know that this existed, at least this is information that they can get as well. So let me take a look at the chat and what else has come up in this discussion here. Looks yummy, right? Exactly, Latrice. Thank you. Yes, exactly. Farzana. Yeah, exactly. Seeds contain omega-3s. Yeah, sometimes we forget. Like, and also adds texture. Like if you enjoy crunchiness to something, or even just like a handful for a snack, like sometimes we forget there's so many different varieties of things. Thank you, Johanna. I appreciate that. Yeah, exactly. Johanna, you are killing it, by the way. I've seen a lot of the meals that you've been making on social media, and I think you are doing fantastically. So we should come together one day and collaborate maybe on some of these discussions. So my friends, I just want to say, first of all, thank you for coming to these things. I continue to do this. I think this has been like 6 years now that I've done these on a pretty monthly basis. They're always free. I like providing education that is easily accessible. I don't ask for donations or I used to, but nobody gives me donations. So don't worry about donations. But I do appreciate if you follow me on social media, if you share some of this information with people that you know, whether it's online or in the real world. Tag me on things. Let me know if you got any information from this, or you're excited about experiencing or experimenting with something, and tag me wherever you are. It really does help with broadening my reach to places that I want to go across the globe in the virtual space, but also it helps with providing some expert knowledge and education to people who might not have any idea of what they're doing, or if they're meeting with, doctors who don't necessarily speak in a language, and I'm talking like in the actual verbal language of explaining how conditions work, or they scare their patients into not eating something, or whatever the case may be. I really encourage everybody to recognize the value that a dietitian can add to your healthcare team, whether it's through these ways that we meet in the virtual world, or if we meet in a more private practice one-on-one setting. So next month, on Thursday, September 12th, I had to start a little bit late today. I usually do these around 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock Eastern time, but today I started at 2. So next month, we're going to go back to a little bit earlier time slot at 12 o'clock, and we're going to talk about longevity. Healthy Aging Month is in September. We're going to look at what's known as the blue zones. These are regions across the globe where people are living to the age of 100 and more, and they're doing it in a very healthy way. So we're going to check out some of the things that they do, and maybe we can incorporate some of those habits into our lifestyles as well. If there's any other final questions, comments, feedback, anything that you have here, please let me know. Otherwise, keep an eye out. Like I said, in a few days, you'll get a link to the recording of this, and you'll also get a link to a survey because I like some feedback. Let me know what's interesting, if you thought this was good, or it could be added to it for any future webinars that I'll be giving. And I so appreciate all of your time. Thanks, everybody, for coming. Thank you, everyone.